this thing. Rountree, Climate Adaptation Partnerships Specialist with NOAA, and Brandi Janssen of Iowa. Thank you so much, and Megan.
Okay, so does this mean that those of you who are online can hear me if I have a microphone? I don't see but Ben is monitoring it, so we're just checking. Fabulous. Thank you all as we get situated and settled this morning. Again, my name is Megan O'Toole. I am currently an assistant teaching professor at Iowa State, but before that, I just want to note that I was a museum educator. Note that because I came to this work through the curriculum development team for this project. And it really colors the way that I look at the work. I'm really thinking about community development through a volunteer management lens. And so it's a little different than just an academic. I am on the Rural Shrink Smart project at Iowa State University. Excuse me. I have my morning. And we started a project several years ago that was thinking about how we can learn from communities who are thriving in difficult conditions. And we ended up coming up with a framework called Belonging Through Bridging. So our context is purely in Iowa. You all are very familiar with Iowa, so I won't go through the background. We speak in other places who are very unfamiliar with Iowa, and you all share some of the conditions of our production. But one of the things that's very particular to Iowa is the way in which the railroad and the towns were laid down evenly across the state. Iowa and Illinois were the places where the Jeffersonian grid was most evenly laid throughout the United States. And so we have a very even set of towns. 1 in every 20 towns in the entire United States is in Iowa. It's a very large percentage, but it means that we have a lot of towns with very small populations, 11, 24, many are under 500. And so we have these rural and shrinking places who are wondering how to thrive in very harsh conditions. So we were thinking about how might we consider what these towns are doing and how can we support what they are doing well. And so the Rural Shrink Smart project is dealing with this quadrant up here in the top left. It's looking at towns, and we were looking at, in one case, the towns who were growing and the towns that are experiencing depopulation. And then those who, through quality of life surveys, the Iowa State University holds the Iowa Small Town Poll, longitudinal study going back. And we have data, I think it's every 10 years, looking at quality of life metrics, so we can see how people feel about their place. Remember that these are perceptions of quality of life, not actual measuring of services. So how do you feel about your services? What is your perception of those services? We wanted to consider the quadrant who felt positively, but was still experiencing depopulation. That felt like a really particular and important set of conditions that we wanted to understand. What were those people doing in their community in order to thrive as a group, as people, to positively feel about their place despite what is often considered a catastrophe. We worked with 6 communities. These are some of our visits. Some of them were thriving, some of them were on a cusp, some of them had gone through a change or a shock. Some of the shocks that we might consider in the research were things like school closures or consolidations. These are things where schools are a place where communities really get brought together because of the children. So if you are new to that town, how do you get integrated? Pretty difficult because it's a really close-knit group. And so likely you're being integrated through the community. So when the school closes, all of a sudden people who had a central location to go and share experience no longer have that. And so we were interested in what happens when the communities experience those shocks. So we are proposing a new paradigm that despite, that the communities need to focus on not growth. Many of our small communities are asked to consider growth and are sold economic development models for how to manage their populations and their resources. And we find that that growth mindset is a big problem for these small places who are often not going to experience growth for reasons that are outside of their control. So that's one of the things we do when we go and present to small towns is we tell them this, that it's not their problem and that they shouldn't feel personally responsible for the fact that there is outmigration of young people who are not returning those places. Some are, but it has created an environment where people want to feel very positively about their place, but often feel very negatively because they are experiencing those people leaving. So they will continue to shrink. But despite this, we want to start to decouple depopulation and that happens both in the research space, but also for our towns and our communities and the way that they talk about what it is that they're. A decoupling of, because I am shrinking, it does not mean that this is not a great place to live. One of the things that we talk about with our towns is if you do have a company who's going to come, or you do have a manufacturing plant that's going to come, or something is going to come into your town, and they have hundreds of small towns that are similar, what are the things that are going to bring them to your small town? And it might be a positive sense of community and a good quality of life. So a lot of our community members will note that they have to drive for groceries or they have to drive for certain services. They don't necessarily feel negatively about that, right? So our feeling about it and the access to services can be two different things. So we think that communities focusing on a positive quality of life and a sense of community are going to thrive and be able to attract those businesses, though that shouldn't be their primary focus. Their primary focus should be on creating a quality of life with those who are already there. So this is what we call real smart shrinkage. I'm checking my time. I'm going to talk for maybe one more. Let's see this. Oh, is it like hard to hear us? Okay. Is this better? Oh my. I just got settled in. All right, so it's fine. Okay, so we have a couple of things that we observed, which I think I have mentioned a little bit, but we noticed that relationships big and small, so strong and weak ties, are ways in which people feel in place through their communities. And so we want to prioritize that to the communities that we go and visit, which is a different message than an economic development message. We're like, who are you talking to when you go to the grocery store? And do you know that person? What's going on there? Trust can be acquired, cultivated, and strengthened among new people. We are looking to cultivate bridging capital. There are 3 different types of social capital: bonding, bridging, and linking. I'm not going to go into all of that, but the main thing I want you to know is Iowa and many of our rural places have really strong bonded social capital, which means that they feel very positively with people who share similar backgrounds and identities as themselves. And so working to create space for bridging social capital means that we're coming together to do something that we both care about, but is not based on our shared identity. So bridging social capital is what we are focused on. We can do that through purposeful collective action. And so this works towards a framework where we get communities together and we do workshops for them to consider the ways in which they might have opportunities to find ways to work together, ways in which to build social capital with those that they are not already familiar with or not don't share identities with. So I'm going to turn it over to my peers for their presentations, but I'm going to come back up midway through our talk, and I'm actually going to give you all a chance to participate in just a little bit of that workshop so that you can have a taste of that. And then on the other side of the workshop, we will all be able to talk, and then you will be able to ask us questions. Great? Okay, thank you. can minimize mine if you want to do it.
Okay. Okay, it's short. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cristina Carvajal, and I'm here to talk about Wisconsin Ecolatinos work. Then I will go in detail about a specific project that we worked on for 3 years now. So Wisconsin Ecolatinos is a community-based organization. Our mission is centered on environmental justice. We want to elevate a Latino community in the environmental field. We want to bring attention to the impact of pollution in people's health. So we know pollution is impacting minorities and people in disadvantaged communities at a higher rate. And we feel this is a very important issue that needs to be approached with the community. We also want the community to find solutions and participate in climate change and adaptation. And we advocate for an equitable transition to clean energy. So the way we work is through community engagement, community outreach. We want to make sure, we want to eliminate barriers. We want to make sure people feel they belong and they are welcome in certain spaces. So we want to create a space where they can learn about environmental conservation and all these issues that we're approaching that are related to climate change. So we do lots of workshops and events and community engagement in bilingual. Bilingual. We do a lot of things in Spanish because that's the reality. There is a large population of adults that don't speak English, or they speak English at a certain level, and they would prefer to learn these type of things in their native language. And so we also found out, that the communities that we work with, they work during the week and they don't have extra time to take to get training on these topics. So most of our programming is during the weekends where people doesn't have to go to work, and of course we allow the whole family to participate because they don't want to leave their kids behind. So, and it's something, with if Latino families that they want to do things with the whole family. So we welcome the whole family in the programs that we do. And in general, we want to create a space where people feels comfortable to come and learn these topics. I just going to mention a few of the programs that we are working on. As I mentioned, pollution and health is very important to our mission. We have an indoor air quality program where we're doing these workshops to teach people about what are the hazards that can affect them, and we want to make sure they have the tools to approach those hazards. So here in this picture, you see we were able to offer radon test to the participants for free. Another program that we have is Filter Not Bottle. We just launched this program to have people reduce the use of plastic. And we were fortunate enough to get funding to purchase filter water, filter pitchers for people, so they can filter the water and not use plastic. It's an incentive, basically. And we also had a really successful campaign on PFAS awareness. That was last year. So this, the point here is, this picture, we, of course, want to motivate people to learn. Sometimes, it trying to teach science to the community is not easy, is not fun. So we want to do some, blend environments, some activity that is fun, learn to kayak, come with us, you're going to have fun, come with the family, and then we learn about PFAS. That was also a very successful campaign that we worked with a community center, a Catholic Multicultural Center. And of course, the goal is to have people learn about it and take action, take action on, the specific issue. We also have a tree tour program with our partners at UW Extension and also Urban Tree Alliance, to increase the tree canopy. We have worked, with schools and do also workshops for adults, to learn more in depth, details about, what are urban trees and what are the pests, what can they plant and be more engaged in the topic so we can create that leadership that they can, go and pass through their own community. We also work with Dane County Office of Climate Change on a home energy assistance program to have the community benefit from the IRA rebates. So we have two ambassadors, two guides that are gonna, working with the community. That are working with the community to have them learn how to apply for the IRA rebates. We also do a bilingual environmental conservation fair. This year was our third year. That was actually last Saturday, April 26th. Really successful. We had almost 25 organizations come with really, really nice, valuable information for our community. So the families come and learn. And we were very lucky that we had really good weather because that hasn't happened for the previous 2 years. So, so as you see, we want to pass all this information, and it's a lot of information for the community. That it's, that is not obvious for most people, right? It may be obvious for us, but it's not obvious for them. Many of this information has lots of science involved too. So we really want to work with the community and have them learn about it, but we don't want them to stop there. We want them to gain ownership and move on to action and then leadership, right? We want them to go to the next step. So that's how, yeah, that's our we're always thinking about that, how we can do that. In the case that I wanted to present, the program that I wanted to talk about, that I think we have been able to achieve this goal of really empowering people and moving through action and leadership. The Tuagua project was an initiative that started in partnership with the UW Arboretum and UW Extension. And it began on 2023. We began conversations with them, and basically the idea was, they said there are lots of programs, on stormwater pollution prevention, all these actions and all these activities that people can participate in, but there are basically little to none participation from underrepresented communities in these programs. So then the goal was, to create a program that would engage the community on something like this. We did a couple of listening sessions and had people, we showed them, like this is, this is. So I began telling them, well, you cannot ask people to build a rain garden when they don't even know what's the purpose, right? So we decided, to do the listening sessions and have people, say, they want to learn first, the basics, what is this for? And then so we asked them, how they want to learn. Of course, many of them adults. Um, that it's the people that owns, makes the decisions in their houses, right? They wanted to have, of course, not the traditional classroom teaching, but more on the practice uh, environment. And so we created this workshop, the science. Sorry, I think I skipped one. Science behind Tuagua, where we teach, we were teaching just the basics of the watershed, what's a watershed, what is the a healthy water, what means to have a healthy lake, or what it lives, what animals live there and all that. They wanted to learn something like that. And then again, like explaining what is affecting, what's the impact to these uh, uh, water bodies. So they learned all these issues, and we did a second session that was leadership and Tuagua. And then that was, okay, you have the basis of the issue. Then let's learn, learn about what can we do with that, right? So we want to build it. The knowledge needed to be an effective leader. Um, and finding the common goals to take care about the environment. Some people would care more about water, and others, they like the plants or air quality. Um, and also, having them learn how to participate in the decision making process. We explain, you have, you can write letters to the legislators, you can go call the city manager, or find someone, if you see a problem, you have the agency to go and act and do it. And the participants of this program were given many choices of programs they could participate in, they could join. From this program, we also began we did the first bilingual stream water monitoring training with Water Action Volunteer. That is a really very old program, very established program that monitors streams health with the help of volunteers. And as you see, we did all these sessions, for people, the families came with their children and learn about how to monitor a stream. So we continue the program this year again. New partners came along. Dane County Ripple Effect joined, and Rock River Coalition also joined the program. And as a result, so after all these, training sessions, so we had 9 people committed to the Water Action Volunteer Program. We had one group developing an arts and conservation project, and they're going to paint a mural related to water conservation at La Follette High School. 5 of those participants also joined our PFAS awareness campaign. So I see, just all, throughout the whole process, I saw the engagement of people and really, finding, that interest in the environment and finding ways to participate and gain leadership. Thank you so much.
All right, hello everyone. I am Emily Rountree. I'm the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Specialist for the Central Midwest for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I serve the Central Midwest states of Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. I want to preface this presentation with this was not the presentation that you'll see today is not the original intent of what we proposed for this session. It has been affected by the funding cuts of the last few months. Unfortunately, our friends and colleagues at the EPA Region 7 TIC-TAC have been defunded. The EPA Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center out of Wichita State that served the Heartland Environmental Justice Center. The intent was to showcase two federally funded teams that served frontline disadvantaged and low-income communities with support for climate adaptation and environmental justice. So I just think it's important to not ignore that. You get to see a little bit of a deeper dive into the NOAA Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program. I'm going to share a little bit more about my position, which I think is I get no credit for this, but I think is a really good example of federal, regional, and local partnerships in action. So, as the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Specialist for the Central Midwest, my position is the third of its kind. Two before me came in the Caribbean. So, the NOAA CAP program is a national program traditionally centered on research teams at universities. There had not been a CAP team in the Central Midwest before, and so as they expand into different regions, they have come up with this structure to put a partnership specialist in those regions where they're expanding into to help support the expansion of the program, get to know the landscape of the people doing this kind of work, and help support the work that they're doing and come up with some programs that can help better integrate folks in that region. So my partnership that was set up for me is between the NOAA CAP program, the Mid-America Regional Council, and Kansas City, which is the municipal planning organization for Kansas City. Can I see hands from my MPO folks and my MERC folks? Okay, so I get to serve on a climate team there. So I have an office space. There aren't a lot of NOAA people in Kansas City. So I get to be part of a community and get to know the partnerships that they have, and they're really strong throughout the Kansas City region. And I'm also, I'm contracted through the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research. So NOAA has a cap on the amount of federal employees that they have, and so they contract out a lot. So I'm not technically a federal employee, and so I contract through UCAR. So it's a great, and I get support from them as well. Just a little bit about the organizational structure of where the CAP program is. We're part of the Oceanic and Atmospheric Research line, and we're housed in the Climate Program Office. The Climate Program Office is the climate space for NOAA. It really focuses on research, communication and education, and research and partnerships, which is where we are. So the CAP program is a really interesting sort of different structure for NOAA. We are mostly comprised of folks who are social scientists, justice folks. We're kind of that branch of NOAA, and our mission is to advance the equitable adaptation through sustained regional research and community engagement. So really taking the idea that communities and long-term partnerships are the key to understanding and implementing successful climate adaptation throughout different regions. So they're through these grant structures. So Brandi is the PI for the CAP team in the Central Midwest out of the University of Iowa. So I'm just kind of setting her up to talk a little bit more about her program. But a little bit about the history of the CAP program too. It was started in 1995, and as it grew, it really started focusing on more of the complexities and the compound stressors of climate, and integrating that climate science and the partnerships, and really focusing on the relationships and the importance of those as a mechanism for climate adaptation through understanding and working with communities. So like I said, there are teams all over the place. So the Caribbean and us are probably the newest ones. They're working with FEMA and communities to do hurricane preparedness, and still working with communities to respond and recover from Hurricane Maria. So just a couple examples. There are folks in this southern team that are working with rural and tribal communities to work on their hazard mitigation plans to help them draw more funds and be more prepared for their stressors there. There's in Vegas, the CAP team runs the Desert Research Institute, DRY. I thought was very clever. Folks in the Pacific Islands in Hawaii, they set peer relationships between the islands to work on their climate adaptation plans. So Honolulu had a really strong, robust one. They worked on it for probably 6 years, and then they worked with Maui, who's a much smaller community, and they were able to get their climate adaptation or climate action plan done in 6 months because they were working together, and the CAP program helped facilitate those relationships. So just a couple examples of what's going on. I would not be surprised if a few of you in this room were familiar with, had personal interactions with, or have at least heard of the Great Lakes Integrated Sciences Assessment Team. They've been around for a long time and are a pretty strong team. So just a real quick little bit about the Mid-America Regional Council too, just to give them, I get to work and see what a real strong climate team does. They have folks in air quality and water quality and green infrastructure and solid waste. They have all of these folks to be able to support climate work throughout the 119 cities and throughout the 9 counties in the Kansas City region. So I get to benefit from a lot of the partnerships that they've put together. So a little bit of my work. So I facilitate connections, I build awareness, I support climate adaptation, and am a part of the CAP program. So when I started, of course, you know, like I said, I have access to a lot of these partnerships in Kansas City, but of course my geographic scope is Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. So there was less of an understanding of what to do, really. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm set up at MARC is because they really wanted to connect with local governments specifically. And I was like, okay, I'll take that piece of information and I'll run with that. So I started, I essentially did a series of semi-structured interviews with sustainability directors throughout the region. I started asking them questions, started making my own relationships, getting to know the landscape of what sustainability directors were dealing with in their own cities and their own complex systems, and how they are advancing the work of climate and environment work in their own cities. So I took all of that and what they needed and what they wanted. And so I took some of those things, and then I went to NOAA and I said, hey, is there anything that NOAA could, you know, do to help what these cities are asking for? And NOAA was like, we don't do any of that. It was mostly economic work that cities were having to constantly prove the worth of climate work within competing priorities in their cities. Things like, you know, they wanted to know like what the cost of inaction is. What happens, how can I prove to my city what the cost would be if we don't move these climate plans forward? Things like that. So I said, okay, you know, maybe we can figure this out anyway. So I was at KU before this position, and I had a relationship with the Kansas Data Science Consortium. And I said, hey, you know, I've got this conundrum. Is there anything that the Kansas Data Science Consortium could do? And they said, yeah, we actually have this program where we want local governments and nonprofits to give us their data issues and give us their data problems. And then depending on the scope of those, they give them to either graduate students, undergrads, or community college students, and they work on those projects throughout the semester and then give it back. And I was like, okay, great. So I put out a call. Kansas City, Missouri signed up. Lincoln signed up. And Lincoln wanted a climate decision-making tool for the city, which I thought was really interesting. So they're like, oh, we want a new pool for the city. You can go, here are the climate impacts. I thought that was really, really interesting. So that's one of the programs that I put in place. It's going to happen every year. It's not just bound to Kansas. So actually, this is kind of a plug for this. If anybody here has any data sitting around that you're like, this would be really cool to work with, or this project is something that I've had in mind, but I just don't know how to deal with the data, let me know, and maybe we can work with the Kansas Data Science Consortium. The timeline is pretty long, so they take the requests throughout the summer and fall, and then the students do the projects in the spring. And then the next step, I'm hoping that I can, I'm working with a professor at the Kansas City Art Institute that teaches data visualization, to be able to then take the data that the students put together and package it in a way that the cities can then present to whatever audiences that they so choose. I'm also putting together this Central Midwest climate adaptation conversation. I'm putting together, I cannot take credit also for this structure. It's a program from KU that did lightning talks, so quick 5-minute talks over a particular topic. It was really effective in creating multidisciplinary collaboration at KU, and I'm hoping that it will also do the same in the Central Midwest based on climate adaptation themes like heat, water, working with rural communities, supporting frontline communities, things like that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandi to talk a lot more about her program and the Central Midwest Co-Learn team.
Good morning. Thank you, Emily. Megan, since I've been reflecting this whole time on the concept of growth and economic growth and encouraging stepping back from that mindset, and I cannot help but just think we would not be in this climate crisis if we were not so attached to the idea of growth. So yay for degrowth. Thank you for pointing that out to us. That's your meditation on your way home, is to think about that. I'm delighted to talk about our relatively new project. Our funding started in September of 2023. We are the Central Midwest Climate Opportunities and Learning Team, CM Co-Learn, otherwise known as the Central Midwest CAP team. We're sort of referred to in both ways. And the learning piece there is sort of the core. So spoiler alert, that's a key element of how we put the project together and what our approach is. We are still funded. Yay. Woo! Every day, you never know. It's a new day, so we're glad that we're still funded. I am the PI of the grant overall, but we have a leadership team that is highly multidisciplinary and covers most of our region. I'm an anthropologist by training. I'm situated in a college of public health. Martha Durr, who is at the Nebraska Indian Community College, focuses on our tribal engagement. She has a background in meteorology and climatology. Linda Shank at Iowa State University, who is a Shakespearean scholar. Obviously, every climate team needs a Shakespearean scholar, and she is ours. I will not share her. She's ours. But she brings expertise in community-based storytelling that has really added a lot of richness to this project and sort of foundational to how we approach a lot of the work. And Gabriele Villarini, who was formerly at the University of Iowa. He's skated off to this little school in the east called Princeton. But we've kept him involved as our climate modeler and hydrologist on the team, as well as Sarah Helmer, our intrepid program manager, who keeps us all organized, and a number of community partners who many folks who we've worked with over the years in our previous academic lives, but also new and building partnerships with a number of NGOs around the region. So when we pitched the project, I always say I've never written a grant where I said we don't know what the questions are or exactly how we're going to answer them, but trust us. We'll figure it out. And we got funded. It's very exciting. So we really did propose this team as a deeply community engaged process that involved collaborative learning and de-emphasizing the expertise of researchers going into this and recognizing that the lived experiences of people in our region, the expertise that they bring is really critical. And we wanted to center that in our project. So we had aims of bringing together community members and researchers, co-production of knowledge. We are emphasizing perspectives in this first year cycle. Let's just assume that we'll have another funding round in 5 years. But starting focusing on tribal nations and women landowners in our region for a couple of reasons. One is that those are groups that have historically been very systematically excluded from adaptation planning and a lot of these discussions, but also because each tends to bring, and we know this from the literature and from our own work, a more relational and social mechanisms of solving problems that we thought would be very productive in our own learning and also in sort of building out and scaling solutions for other types of communities. And then applying social science methods, storytelling across all project activities to illuminate these issues. So yes, we are mostly the sort of social scientists of this. So, I had some design on that slide that went away, so I'll have to read it to you. So how do you build a team that is based around collaborative learning? You have the patience of a 13-year cicada. It is a slow process. It is iterative, and we really focus more on the journey than the destination, and recognizing that each step along the way, we learn something new, and that is how we sort of build our ultimately a research portfolio, because these are research grants at the end of the day, but we're building the structure in a sort of different way. So I'm glad the cicada got actually the highlight on that slide. That's probably better. So we had some choices as our funding started and thought, okay, how do we, where do you really start putting your energies initially? And so we opted to really lean into what essentially is a community grant program that we had written into the proposal. We call them community action projects, and they have very broad objectives. One is to improve climate resilience within our 4-state region, recognizing that climate resilience is conceptualized differently and broadly depending on who you're talking with. So we don't really have any sort of core, guidance, I guess, on what that is, because we want it to be community driven and to build partnerships, right? Recognizing that the social fabrics, the social capital are really critical to doing this work as well. So we offer 2 levels of funding, roughly up to $1,000. We imagine sort of year-long projects, up to 2 years for $10,000 projects. Broadly, who can apply? Incorporated nonprofits, state, local, and tribal governments, or groups of people who form an informal association to carry out a project. So we have funded projects that are led by a group of women landowners in a watershed, for example. And it took a little time, but we did figure out a mechanism at the university to get them paid, which is probably actually where I spent most of my time in the first year of this grant, is figuring that out. We take applications on a rolling deadline, so folks can apply for them at any time. And they are open to anyone. Of course, we are focused on those perspectives of supporting women landowners and tribal nations. That is sort of our emphasis, but that doesn't preclude others. We spent a lot of time thinking about how do you set up a program that because a big part of our rationale for the program is that we learn something. As an anthropologist, I think you learn a lot from people based on what questions they are asking and how they approach problems they want to solve. To me, that is really instructive, and much more instructive than saying, I'll just interview them. Because people often can't actually tell you, but when you sort of observe people in action, you learn a lot if you're ready for that learning and you're paying attention. But that being said, we also wanted to make this process as easy as possible for community partners. And those of you who are situated in universities know that it is often not easy to interact equitably and fairly with community partners. There is a big power differential between a major university and many of the entities that we're working with. So we started with an application that is very lean. Project description, we want to help understand how they envision building partnerships, how they envision working with us and with each other going forward. A quotation of support or encouragement. We're not asking for letters of support, but we'd love some indication of sort of others in their community who are supportive of the work. And then, some project descriptions, of course, budgets, and we do have some, administrative language about allowable costs and all that kind of stuff. But with time and fortunately with some good buy-in from our university, from our sponsored programs, and from our grants accounting and all of those other communities that I engage with, we've come to a process that is pretty smooth, I would say, and we're able to get folks set up in the university system, and they are getting paid. So yay! I know, it's like the big win. So I'll talk just briefly about some of the current action projects that we have going on now. I thought I had a fourth photo there. That's so strange. So many of these are among women landowners, primarily in Iowa, and several of them sort of focus on storytelling processes to support conservation activities, to sort of motivate conservation activities, and to serve as learning circles about conservation. In some cases, the grants also have another layer of small funding for individuals who want to try a new strategy on their land, right? So they want to try cover crops for the first time or put in a small pollinator habitat. And so there's a process of both a learning circle to discuss, some funding to get them started, a reflective activity at the end so that people can sort of share what they learned and sort of, promote or problem solve as they need to. Another one that's been very interesting is using the Agricultural Conservation Planning Framework, which is a GIS-based tool, in combination with storytelling strategies to help people use sort of data to make decisions about conservation practices on their land. And that's been a really interesting project to see come to fruition. And then a number of events and sort of workshops and things aimed at facilitating conversations about conservation and providing support for conservation activities. In the tribal space, we've had a couple of projects with the Santee Nation in what is now Northeast Nebraska, setting up weather stations. I'm also excited that we just helped install a weather station and a monitoring station on Ponca land as well in the last couple weeks. But these have been really helpful, and Martha Durr, our colleague in Nebraska, her faculty position is at Nebraska Indian Community College. And so she spent a lot of time working with tribal members to understand, okay, so what's your capacity for data management? This is not our data that is being collected, this is yours, but how can we set it up in a way that can be managed on site and that you can do with it what you want, and that it doesn't require a lot of, constant sort of technical monitoring and, fixing. And so they've set up these systems that so far have been working really well on the Santee Nation, and then we hope to sort of promote these as a potential model for other tribal entities who are interested in their own independent environmental monitoring. And I have to say, it tickles me to use NOAA money to help tribes be independent from NOAA. I just think that's kind of great. So what are we learning so far? It's been really interesting the way, some of the tasks that we felt are part of these teams is to help sort of link the NOAA data with communities. And so, but what we're also learning is that you go in and you start talking to people about climate tools and they're like, I don't know, right? What do I want? So particularly with the women landowners, thinking about entering these discussions more focused on the language of care for the land and sustainability are more productive than sort of starting at the climate angle. And so watching these discussions emerge, we've sort of learned sort of how to talk about these issues a little more effectively. Most of the things have been focused on women, but it was like our second program. We got an email. So I think my husband would really benefit from this. Can we change our scope of work so that we're, including men? And we were like, well, yes, you can. That would be great. What an interesting thing that sort of immediately you're thinking beyond sort of, how effective these meetings are and how you could sort of spread the news. I will also add that a lot of the women landowners who we're working with they have tenants. So it's not just their husbands, for example, who might benefit from the messages, but they're also trying to understand how they work with tenants on their land to do sort of more conservation-focused agriculture. And I think there are a lot of really interesting questions and processes there. Sovereign nations value independent data collection and data sovereignty. We feel that our task is to sort of provide support in whatever appropriate way to get systems set up and then ensure that they have the ability to monitor and maintain and use the data however they like without a lot of interference or sort of oversight from a research team. We have to consider local capacity. What kind of personnel do they have? What sort of systems are available? And then also recognizing, and as we are learning, particularly from tribal connections in Santee, sort of the frustration of traditional adaptation and hazard planning that focuses on climate hazards and completely ignores broader factors such as language loss and socioeconomic realities that really are also exacerbating climate hazards. And so how do we help sort of facilitate ways to think about these hazards holistically and that aren't just sort of siloed in a very technical strategy? So as we move forward, these projects have sort of become the foundation of what I imagine will be our future, again, pretending that nothing else is happening, our future research portfolios as we move forward and are then responsive to what we're seeing in the region. So we see portfolio areas in climate change and conservation practices, environmental monitoring, adaptation planning, again, thinking holistically and how can we do that really well. Food sovereignty is coming up over and over and over in both communities and all states, I think, and we have a couple of emerging projects that are focused on food systems and food sovereignty, and then also policy and advocacy and recognizing that we have a role to potentially motivate and help people understand sort of the political and the political structures that affect a lot of these plannings and how they can engage in appropriate ways at their local or state or regional level to frame some of these policy decisions. So I think that's what I have. And I'll turn it back to Megen.
I actually kind of love that this landed on a white slide. You've been hearing a little bit about these different projects, and I want to return to this idea of our own practices. So I'm going to have you grab a piece of paper from the center of the table, or if you have your own pad of paper, that's fine as well. I'm not going to collect it. It's not for me, it's for you. But I am going to ask if you don't mind to participate. I would love to have you. Thank you so much for that. Work with us to experience a little bit about a workshop. So, yes, I can. Can you hear me better now? No? It might just be that I have to talk into a mic and it makes me nervous. Yeah, this is great. Okay. So, yeah, because I can hear myself more. That's why I'm talking softly. Okay, so what I want you to do is you've heard from all of these wonderful presenters. When in the project for Belonging Through Bridging, one of the things that we notice in our communities in rural Iowa is that a lot of our communities haven't actually been asked what they think belonging is. And they're not actually assessing it from what it is they do every day. And we get a lot of people in the room who are giving us idealized versions of what it means to build community. And so what I would like you to do is imagine the last time that you were at home, because many of us are away, and think about your just last regular day. Maybe it was earlier this week. Pick a day, pick a very specific day to hold in your mind. You can write down that day if you need to kind of hold yourself there. And I want you to make a list of everywhere that you went on that day. Where did you go? Yes, it is that simple. Did you go to the grocery store? Did you go? Yes, that's okay.
I know. This is what I'm already.
Just do your best that you can. It'll be fine. There's no right answer. Nobody's getting any credit for this. Where did you go? Where are the places that you went? If you want to include digital places, you have regular meetings, you have regular people that you gather with, but it's digital, that's fine. This is your list. Once you've done that, I'd like you to somehow make that visible through some kind of diagram, map it. I come from the design college. And when we think about using our hand and connecting with our brain, and then having to recall something and then draw it, we're doing a lot of memory work. So go ahead and make some kind of diagram that puts these places in relationship to one another. And I apologize, I'm doing this kind of quickly. We can do this for up to, not this particular part, but usually I have quite a bit of time. So we're just going to move right through. If you have put your places in relationship to one another and they are drawn on your page, I want you to list who you saw there. Who did you engage with? You don't need to know their names. Maybe you do. Maybe these are people that you went to see. Maybe these are people that you happen to see. Maybe they are familiar, maybe they are not. The last little detail that we're going to add to our map before I ask you maybe a more difficult question is, how did you get from place to place that day? Connect those places. What was your mode of transportation? And does that bring other people or other places onto your map? Were there people that you saw while you were walking? Or did you commute with somebody? What does that add? Sure. If you want to include a bird that crossed your path, please. If that's a relationship that you had that day, please do. Please do. That's great. I think that will play into this next question. Okay, so one of the things that when we're doing workshops in rural places, we're trying to ensure that when somebody's thinking about their day, they're not giving us an idealized day of this is who I am in my community. You know, these might be city managers, they might be people who take on a lot of volunteer responsibilities, and they often have a list of how they participate. And so we need to get them outside of that. And so we're asking people to ground themselves in an actual day. Just where did you go? Who are your strong and weak ties? How did you get there? What are you participating in outside of our resumes? So the thing that I want you to now ask yourself is, on this map, is there anywhere that you feel a sense of belonging? And can you mark that place in a special kind of way? And if you feel a sense of belonging on that map, can I first get a rate? Maybe let me ask this. Have any of you ever been asked what belonging looks like for you personally? Yeah, a little bit. but I'm not seeing crowds of hands, right? So many of us have not been asked specifically what belonging looks like, and we use the language of belonging in communities a lot without ever asking what that means and what it looks like. So I'm going to ask you to identify a place of belonging, and I'd like you to try to describe what it is that makes you feel that sense of belonging in that place specifically. And I'm going to apologize because usually this is where I give you time to talk to one another, but I'm going to skip that so that we can all talk as a group and respect my panelists and talk more broadly about all of our projects together. So I'm going to skip that and I'm going to ask you, is there a place on this map where you make belonging? Maybe it's a different location. Maybe it's not yet there and you can add it. That's fine. But I'm a little curious to hear what you might have written down with regard to what belonging actually looks like to you. And I'm wondering if there are places in which you make it for others. Does that make sense? I heard a no. Do you want me to give you an example? When I did this workshop in Latvia, Latvia, the community there, they're not used to looking at each other in the eyes and smiling. It's not a typical way in which they engage with one another. But there was this one woman who had lived abroad for some time, and she walked on this path to go to work every single day. And so in this workshop, when we had a full hour for this component, she described that there was a man that she passed who would meet her gaze and give her a smile back, even though it wasn't the cultural norm. And so they had no idea who each other were. They didn't know each other's names. They didn't know where they went, but they both ended up on this bridge in a rural part of town, crossing to go to or from work or home, whatever it might be. And so they knew each other. And so she described that as her moment of feeling belonging, and that eye contact and that experience was the thing that held her in place. And so then she described the ways in which she maybe participates with other people and meets their gaze or doesn't in another context. So this is one way where somebody felt a sense of belonging, and then she had to do the difficult work of not maybe, thinking about how she maybe creates it for others. Does this make a little sense? Okay, so I'm going to leave you all in the very hard place of this workshop when we usually have about 4 hours with communities to really talk about what does it mean in your community and who is in the room and who is not in the room. And we can get into some very big questions about our relationship building in our communities. And I'm only doing that because I want to make sure that I respect this team and open it up for questions for you all. And so I'll leave you just with that this workshop is asking you to consider belonging, many of you for the very first time, and is now asking us to consider the ways in which we do that for others every day in our communities, and that might be a necessary precondition to actually deal with all of these really massive problems that we have. Yeah. Okay. Should we just? Yeah. So we wanted to leave a little bit of time for conversation, and we have 15, maybe 20 minutes for conversation. So, and we have a couple of working mics, which we didn't have at the beginning. So I would love to open it up to you all. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask of the entire panel? You have one.
All right, I have a real quick question for Emily. What was the group within the EPA Region 7 that had funding cut that you mentioned?
Yep. It was the EPA Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center, or TICTAC for short. They funded the Heartland Environmental Justice Center, which served Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, EPA Region 7.
Wonderful, thank you. And then these are more just general, more broad questions. What are the most effective ways to work across ideologies or the political aisle to build support for resiliency and sustainability initiatives?
A big question.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's only one
Got
correct
the
answer.
answer. Yeah, sure. I think thinking one thing I'm learning from our project, so I'll center it on that at least for now, is thinking really carefully about kind of how people talk about things and taking the time to learn a shared language and sort of where there are shared experiences. So coming, as someone situated in a university who's done a lot of community engaged work over many years now, the hi, I'm from the university or the government and I'm here to help is just not very effective. But what are your concerns and what worries you, or what, maybe even better out, what do you love about your community and what's really good about it, and start from those positions. I will say I've been really, just as a person and kind of paying attention to this context, I've been really interested to watch political races where candidates from either party are winning in places that you wouldn't expect it. And I think, what are they doing? Because they are talking to people. And usually what I hear is that they're doing that good organizing work that I know many of you do too. They're knocking on doors. They are not relying on social media. They are sitting in people's living rooms and they're listening to them. And that makes a difference. So it's hard and it takes time and it gets you out of your comfort zone. But I do think just sitting down and talking to people is really important.
So along that vein, this doesn't necessarily answer the question. If you are feeling so inclined and are appreciative of the work of the NOAA CAP team, so much so that you would like to reach out to your delegation and congresspeople, please let Brandi or I know, and we would be happy to give you messaging that we would like to be passed on. I would say that our program is level high alert on being threatened to cut funding. So if anyone feels so inclined, please let us know. We're happy to share messaging. No obligation, of course.
Yeah, I have a question for you all on the CAP team because I assume the AI will find you since you have all the code words in your
Yeah,
in your work. And so my question is, I'm so intrigued by what you're doing because you're really like putting the knowledge out in the world, and what I'm wondering about is how you're thinking about like the work continuing without the federal funding and perhaps without any NOAA resources or federal resources. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've read that NOAA's taken down all the climate impact maps and then maybe put them back and might take them down again. And I mean, I assume y'all at universities have downloaded that. Anyhow, so my question is about like how you're seeding this work in ways that it'll still be there in 4 years and you might be able to pick it up again.
Go first.
Well, that's a really good question. I think what's interesting, the teams across the country are we're very new, which I would say is what I feel is one of the biggest disadvantages right at this particular moment, because I feel like we have started some really good work in relationship building, and I think the programs and sort of investing directly in sort of community projects tends to resonate with a lot of folks, but we're just getting started. So one thing I think we benefit from, and Emily talked about this structure, and yes, there are federal entities, but we also have a lot of friends in municipal governments and city governments and county level that I think will be beneficial in some cases, our work is, yes, we're downloading the data. I think it's still going to be there. You're just going to have to look a little more for it. And if everyone should be downloading that data, get it, have some, yeah, get it now. But then we have the opportunity to think at different scales about how we use it. So I'm thinking about these women landowners who are already doing this amazing work, and a lot of that can be supported without our federal funding because now they've gotten it started. So let's think about how we facilitate those community level of engagement. It might be a little smaller, it might be a little quieter, but I think it could be very impactful. And we're in a temporary. This is not going to last forever. So be ready for the rebuild. That's what I would also say.
Yeah, totally. Yes. Snaps and claps to that. Yeah. So initially what we had to do was modify our website pretty quickly after the executive orders came through. For better or for worse, our program does have the word climate in our title. So it's pretty clear what we do. And personally, because I am contracted through the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, my personal funding has been transferred from NOAA to UCAR for the next year. And because I don't do any office work for NOAA, I'm not part of the team that makes that work. The purpose of my position is for the bettering of the community at large and not necessarily part of the NOAA CAP, like whether or not they continue to exist. So I've been told that if the NOAA CAP program gets cut, then my position may continue to exist. We'll see. But I think that that's exactly right, that we are trying to right now set up, and anyway, whether or not this was be going on, we're trying to set up structures and partnerships that would continue on whether or not we were there. So supporting the infrastructure of people working together, making sure that people know each other, that are working together in a way that is useful and productive beyond our work.
Hi, I'm Mel from Dane County. Okay, so I wanted to push on a little bit the idea of how to facilitate community building in your neighborhood, because a lot of the work that we do is really focused on messages reaching specific audiences. And I think that we can all agree that we use our community-based organizations as an avenue to translate messages in a way that resonates with the populations that they're serving. But I also think that there are gaps in communication for different populations. If there's not a community-based organization serving a specific area that needs the messaging, maybe it's old homes and we want to retrofit, et cetera. So I do think that there are some gaps in where we're reaching and we could expand that. And I like the idea of how you would use community building to do that. And I'm wondering if you can expand on if you were to do this exercise, or where would you start if you were trying to build a neighborhood team, or how what would be the first steps in order to start building something that was not previously there? Yeah, I think that would be a good avenue to start with. Yeah.
So this is a really unsatisfying answer when we go to all of our community, which is to say that whenever we do this work and whenever we do this facilitation, we specifically say that we're not coming in with any end product in mind. And so often in our outreach, I think when we talk about institutions working with communities, there's often a transactional approach where there's something that's supposed to happen at the end that we're supposed to prove that we did something. And I've tried to push through this workshop this idea that we don't have an answer. We're not coming to you with an answer, and we're not coming here for anything at the end of it. It's just to facilitate a conversation. So the thing I would maybe pose is, in which ways can you participate in the community without needing or desiring or expecting anything in return? And what are those third spaces and weak ties in which you can continue to build those environments for community building and gathering, but without the expectation of some kind of participation? Does that make sense?
Exactly that. It's always again.
that is why, as an academic, I have been, I didn't ask for the funding. I'm a junior member on the grant that I'm on. I was lucky that they even when I pressed them on what the curriculum was that they were creating, that they allowed me to try this tactic. I think that we need more spaces in our communities that aren't transactional and aren't about growing or solving a problem. I think we actually end up getting a lot more done when we actually just care about each other for being there. And I don't have any great answers on that, but I know Cristina has something to say.
So what I wanted to add is, of course, you need to build a relationship with the community and spend time with them. And that's a lot of work. It's not, it's not an in and out. And that is something that I would want to mention in this environment, because I know most of you are academics. And so I have had excellent experiences with some academics, but then some other people, they just want to just give me a survey and have it pass it to the community. That's not how it works. You need to, out of respect to the community, you need to spend time with them, know what their needs are, and build that relationship.
Yes, that, very much that. Show up, spend time, do the FaceTime with people. Also, there are a couple of tools that can help you do a more comprehensive look at your communities. So you maybe help you find the gaps. Community resilience assessments, sustainable livelihoods framework is one of them. And there are a host of tools that can help you kind of parse through the different aspects of your community and help you reflect and think about who you might be including and who might not be as you're going about your work.
Thanks, everybody. This has been really fascinating. My question is more focused on Cristina and Brandi's experience. I just wondered if you could share, putting the funding aside, if there was one thing that you think could deepen the impact of your program, what would that be?
So I'm going to repeat myself, spending time, putting that time into the program, not expecting that you're going to create a program and just in 3 hours, get results. That's not going to happen. It's going to take time. And as I said, creating a program that is respectful to people, it's not about just getting information from there, just come and getting out of something from there, but not just giving something to this community.
That's a really great question. I think to Megan's point, if we had the freedom and the flexibility to just spend time without focusing on an end product, I actually think that would deepen impact. Because I also feel that tension of, despite all my, like, hey, we wrote a grant and we didn't have any questions. That was fun. I am now like, okay, I got to write a report about this in a year. So what, we have to have something tangible. And I do feel that pressure and tension, it frustrates me. And I feel like it makes it transactional in a way that I don't like personally, but I got to play the game as a grantee. And so if I could sit with people and to the point about, there's not a lot of funding for just the capacity building and the relationship building. That's been a gap. I have a lot of funding with the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, which is funded by NIH. So that's another talk. But they had started to fund seed grants just for relationship building, and I was like, finally, they're thinking along those lines that are less transactional and less sort of like, what's the end product? And to me, that would feel, yeah. Then you can just spend the time, as Cristina says.
We just noticed that when people don't have that time, we have champions who are in small towns, and then those champions get burnt out and then have to step away. And so then who's doing the work, and all the work goes away. So the structure literally is sustaining the people who are doing the work and not overburdening them diversifying who you're asking for gifts, diversifying who you're asking for help, like the ways in which you're actually investing in the community is something that we do not prioritize in any way. And those people who are doing that work, it's really hard to sustain alone.
All right, I have another one from online, and you guys have spoke about this, but how has messaging about belonging shifted in the last few months in the United States?
I think that I'm not, sometimes when I show up and I can actually do a full workshop, people will start to ask us questions like we are experts on belonging, and that's not my actual area of expertise. But I do think that coming out with the loneliness epidemic and the ways in which we all are very aware of our social fracturing is making people very concerned. And the architectures, physical and digital, that are around us that hold that loneliness and that fracturing in place are a large concern, and we're all wondering what to do about it. And I think this gets back to the conversation about relationships. So I think there was a comment.
Yeah, from my side, the communities we work with are many of them are immigrants, and by fact, they don't feel they belong. So they don't belong, right? So that's a huge, issue, and in part, that's what we try to, as an organization, we try to create that space where they feel they belong.
I might speak to other words aside from belonging, if that's okay. Because obviously the wording and messaging and framing of what we do has been under attack in the last few months. So I'm going to give credit to Emily Randall here sitting in front about a conversation that we had. Is it okay if I? Okay. So at the Mid-America Regional Council, we have a Climate Environment Council. There's a group of folks in different areas and sectors who all are part of the climate environment game in Kansas City. And there was a conversation following the executive orders about changing the words and what we should do about it. And there was a presentation. Karen, is it okay if I say this? Is it okay? Okay, okay. All right. I don't know if it's like a private. It's public. The minutes are public. Okay, cool. So the director of transportation came up and he said, based on the executive orders, here are the changes that we plan to make to the long-term transportation plans in Kansas City. And it's tough. It's tough to hear that, and and so Emily Randall had a really excellent point. She leads Climate Action KC, and she said, okay, there's a couple of points here. One, these plans were put together using community voice. What does it say to our community if we change the language now and we change their language? B, a lot of these plans are long range, 2030, 2050. What does it mean if we change them short term? And it just changed the conversation to and see what are the actual repercussions if we don't. I mean, I don't have a full grasp on what are the repercussions if we don't change the language. I mean, funding opportunities, but there's no funding opportunities right now anyway. So I think that there is it's just that's the conversation that's being had, at least at our level. It's happening at the NOAA level. What kind of messaging that we use is being reframed, and it's, in my opinion, counterproductive. Obviously, I think that that's the point from their perspective, to make us scramble and change, and so anyway, it's frustrating, but we are all here, and this week has been so encouraging, and I just really hope we continue to create and foster our own connections and keep going.
Thank you so much for coming.